Good afternoon. Thank you very much to the organizers of this amazing event. And thank you to ICAM for your generous support for my participation here. It's really a privilege to be here. So just 2 points. Firstly, spoiler alert, do not expect big numbers, do not expect statistics or graphs, and no objective data. This is all going to be subjective data that I'm going to be presenting, but if it doesn't mean that it is any less scientifically valid just because it's subjective data, because the data can be interpreted and analyzed in an objective manner. So this is a qualitative study. The second point I wanted to make before starting with the slides is that we've been hearing about legislation, education, sterilization as a dog population management mantra. And so the bit that I'm looking at in my study, which was a master's dissertation, was the education bit. And I felt that education is so broad. Everybody defines it in a different way. And I had a very specific idea and a very specific methodology of engaging that I wanted to test. So it's a very specific, tiny little part of dog population management that relates to how we engage with people to influence their behavior regarding dogs. So firstly, the site where my study was done is Gluvukani in the northeastern corner of South Africa. It's a rural village. It's part of Bushbuck Ridge in the Mpumalanga province. And it's a tribal area, so there's communal land. It's right next to the Kruger National Park. There's about 2,000 households and almost 10,000 people, just to give you an idea of the size. The process that I used to see if it would be effective is called participatory reflection and action, which grew out of participatory rural assessment. The thing is that people, as I said earlier, when they talk about education, they often mean I'm telling somebody else to do something because I know more than what they do. And this was my gripe all the time with when people talk about education. What do they actually mean with it? And I think we should perhaps even start thinking about a different word. So participatory reflection and action has very specific characteristics. It's a collaborative process. It is characterized by the reversal of roles. The researcher, in this case, or the facilitator, becomes the learner. The participant becomes the expert. And the participants have an input into what is studied and how it is done and how it is reported. And they have a say in the process. So in this particular case, I also used a strengths-focused approach, which can be distinguished from a deficit-based approach, which is when you go to a community and you say, what are the problems, what are the challenges, let's address those, without considering what are the assets. So instead of a deficit-based approach, we used an asset-based approach, which means you acknowledge the challenges, but you then focus on the assets and see how they can be mobilized by the community itself. The other important aspect of PRA is the handing over the stick concept, just like in running relay, and you pass on the stick. At some point, the facilitator has to step back, and the community takes ownership and runs with it. And it's a great feeling, that feeling of handing over the stick. The theoretical framework I used was empowerment. What it practically meant was I went to this community. It's about 6 hours drive from where I live. And I slept in the Kruger Park. So every day I went to work, I would see game on the way. It was really nice. I went there 7 times. We did 18 sessions, so that was about 2 to 3 morning sessions morning sessions per visit. And I started with 12 participants, which in the end, 8 of them remained throughout the whole process. And it was my job to be their voice. And that's what I want to do today, is be their voice. So I'm going to present you with their evidence, which is their subjective experience. Okay, so keeping in mind again that the object here was to study a methodology and use rabies control as the hook, to hook it onto. What you will see on the slide is a poster. This was just one of the activities that I used early in the process. I sent them out with various electronic devices in little groups, and they took photographs of their community. I printed them out and gave it back to them, and they had to make a poster telling me a story about their community. So I had to shut up and listen. Remember the reversal of roles? Very difficult for a lecturer and a vet to do. Keep quiet, listen. So the initial perceptions that they expressed, and these are their words, okay. They thought that people with rabies might show loss of weight and appetite. They also thought people go crazy when they have rabies. So there were correct and incorrect perceptions, and you can go have a look through that list. As far as causes of rabies go, they had no concept of a viral disease, okay. Treatment, they talked about taking the whole course of a medication. So there was some knowledge about disease, and this may have referred to tuberculosis, possibly, or HIV, AIDS medication, which you are told to keep on taking. Don't stop until the course is done. So it may reflect some confusion about different types of health knowledge that they have. If you look at the poster there that they made, this was, I think, the second visit. It was quite early in the process. This was after we had the discussion where they told me their perceptions of rabies, and I gave them a little bit more information. Okay, so after I told them what the whole rabies thing is, I then asked them, can you list some things that you would like to do in your community to help with this rabies problem? And what I got was dry cleaner, chicken farm, internet cafe, vegetable garden, and so on. Okay, nothing to do with rabies. Can you see at the top of the poster, there's a little word right at the top, and it says rabies. And it was literally an afterthought. One of the participants went back and said, oh my word, we were supposed to be talking about rabies. Now, this was very informative, because they also told me when we addressed challenges that there was a drought ongoing at the time. That was clear. They didn't have access to water. They were worried about the quality of education of the children in the village. There were too many other things that were important to them to worry about rabies. So that was my first little learning curve. About the roles of dogs, guarding, hunting. They should be aggressive to certain people, but not to other people. And then, of course, not as companions. And I specifically asked that question. And it was like, no, you've got to be crazy. We don't do dogs for that reason. Now, keep in mind, just again, for the left-brainers, this is not a quantitative study. These are people that were allocated to me by one of the community leaders who picked people that would be interested in some sort of a community project. Okay, so they didn't come to me and say, we want to learn about rabies or anything like that. The kind of problems they had with dogs was stealing eggs, killing chickens, and biting people. We had the meetings for our participatory engagements in a building right next to an animal clinic that is situated in Glubukani village. It is run by our university jointly with the Mpumalanga Vet Services, the provincial vet services. they did not know about this, that this was a vet clinic, but they lived there and they must have walked past there. Now that's not representative necessarily of the whole community, and this is the point I want to make. I spoke to 8 people that sort of came my way, and we built up a relationship, but that's what they told me. It's their subjective experience. Oh, okay. Some of the perceptions that they told me about was the belief that there's a worm under the tongue, that you have in many other countries as well. It's widespread in South Africa. It's actually the frenulum, which is a normal anatomic structure, and they believe it has to be cut out in order to keep a dog healthy. And they do it in young puppies. It's like a vaccination to them. Okay. They kill dogs when they think it's necessary to euthanize. Remember, they do have access to a vet who can euthanize, but they didn't know the vet was there. Okay? So when they feel an animal has to die, for whatever reason, it bites too many people or kills too many chickens, they may hang it from a tree using wire, not necessarily rope. And they also believe that feeding fish bones will kill a dog. Okay, skin goes, they lose their hair, the skin gets crusty, and the dog will die. I think I'll have to just go a lot faster. Initially, they were very shy to speak and didn't want to express their opinion. They did small group work and then had to report to the larger group in some of the exercises. As they became more informed, because the more we started talking to one another, the more they wanted to know. And then we started getting these kind of comments: vaccinate dogs and live safe. So that came from them. After the dog has been vaccinated, we can live happily. They even understood One Health. So on one of the posters, that's an extract from a poster: dogs take care of people, people take care of dogs. People must treat them well so that the dogs will treat people well. They all felt that they'd learned something. They'd learned how to read body language through this process. They'd learned how to react if a dog is aggressive towards a person, etc. They liked the process of collaborating. They felt personally empowered. They felt that they gained confidence. One participant even said, "I feel like a doctor." They learned to speak better English. This was probably the biggest advantage for all of them. And subsequently, 2 of them were accepted to university and are studying courses. And I'm not saying it's because of this, but it helped them gain that confidence to go and talk to somebody, go to an interview, etc. The community was empowered because this group went door to door, told people the message of rabies. They started a Facebook page and they became rabies activists. They formed the Glubukani Rabies Fighters. There's the logo. And they really became active messengers of the rabies message. They worked on the GARC rabies education certificate. There they are sitting, working on my laptop. Internet access is a challenge there. They discovered their own assets and started utilizing them. And the best thing that they did was, and now it's stuck, okay. A play that they performed to primary school children. I was only there to advise on stagecraft. Okay, I just sat back and they were organizing this whole play. And then I just want to thank the South African Veterinary Foundation for their financial assistance, and of course the amazing participants, the Glubukani Rabies Fighters.